And throughout the movie, they keep making points, right? There's this environmentalism kind of scattered throughout the movie. When they first have contact with the scientist, they say something like, I guess the conspiracy theorists were right. And this is Earth fighting back before we kill it, or something like that. Like, there's a couple of lines like this. And then as they are walking through the ocean wasteland, there's like rubbish everywhere. It's like just empty plastic bottles and whatever. Is it making a point? Yes, there is pollution. That's it. Pollution exists. It seems like very safe, very low effort, like social commentary. And if you have your bingo cards ready, this is us complaining about lazy social commentary. But it's like it expresses these environmentalist ideas, right? But it only kind of references them, right? It does not, like this, the point of the story has nothing to do with that. You can imagine a version of the story in which the pollution is actually a problem, or the reason why, or the pollution is the reason why they can't make it to the submarine. Something, right, where humanity has engineered its own demise. We can imagine like 10 different ways you can engineer a story where the pollutedness of the oceans is the actual threat. Right, not the angry crabs, not the radars, but it's not. We just reference it, and we put some empty plastic bottles like in the background, and that's our social commentary. And so when you look at the reviews, like everywhere, right, it's scathing, right? Like this, everybody's trashing this for good reason. But when you actually read through them and look for some positives, they talk about how, yeah, this is very biting social commentary, or like this really like draws attention to an important topic and whatever. And I'm like, really? Does it? People have very low standards for this stuff. That kind of basically, as far as I'm concerned, just means we're not getting better stories like this, because like if the bars were higher and people said, well, like I'm an environmentalist, I'm not impressed, like you have to try a little bit harder. And if that was the response, then I think we would be getting much better stories. Directors and writers do this because all you need to do is reference like something that everybody agrees on. And then you get celebrated for how amazing your story is. And this is like an example of this, right? Like this is the most basic, hey, did you know pollution exists, right? And the only reason this really stuck out in me is number one, the movie does it like 4 or 5 times. And then also it keeps getting mentioned in the reviews. Like people actually looked at this and said, yeah, that's like the movie's one saving grace. And it just drives me crazy.
I see where you're coming from. But at the same time, you could argue and say that, listen, because their motivation was already at a low, because their budget was at a low. So in a way, you could argue that should we really go into that much effort with the story, do like the actual research and try and impress these, like for example, environmentalists? And like you said, the standard is already low, so you don't really have to go above and beyond if they don't want to.
Yeah. And you know, the reason that I keep harping on about this is like it's every movie.
Yeah.
Like every movie does this. Like we had this in Wicked, where it had the most superficial commentary about its topic, but everybody, like when I sat in a full theater and people around me were applauding at how brave it was, right? But it's not. It's a very basic treatment of this important topic, but it's very basic and doesn't have any insights or does not push any envelopes or anything. It's just reaffirming the most basic idea. And this kind of did even less than that, right? It just on a very basic level mentioned that pollution exists. And that was kind of the degree to which it kind of took a stance.
Well, could you argue and say that they might have been scared? Because sometimes when, you know, there's social commentary, there is always that fear that you don't want to kind of like shove it down their throats.
Well, it's like a middle ground between being basic and being preachy, right? You can actually have something to say. You can actually take this somewhere. I'm trying to think of an example of this, but like science fiction lends itself to this, right? Where you can create any kind of reality you want. And that can then be your allegory or the point you're trying to make. Like, I'm not even sure what I guess the conspiracy theorists were right even means. Does that mean like that, like people who predict doomsday are actually right and we should listen to them? Is that what the movie's saying? Or is it saying nothing at all?